Police are investigating a horrific double murder in a wealthy New York City neighborhood. And as Terrell Brown reports, the victims are two small children.
Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I can't imagine what the mother's feeling.
Her screams were heard by a neighbor who alerted police and who arrived and found the children dead.
Today's case takes us to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, New York, to a 10-story apartment block on West 75th Street, just a block away from Central Park. October 25th, 2012. A woman named Charlotte was in the building's elevator with two children who also lived there and the children's nanny. I told the little girl, "Do you know how beautiful you are?" And she gave me the biggest smile I've ever seen and said, "Thank you." Nothing appeared to be off or out of sorts with the nanny or the children. Less than an hour later, at around 5:30, Charlotte was back in the elevator when she heard what she called a primal scream from somewhere in the building. It was pure terror, she said. It was unlike anything I've ever heard before. As she came out of the elevator, she saw a woman standing on the mezzanine screaming. Other neighbours heard it and came to see what was going on. Marina Krim had taken her 3-year-old daughter Inez, known as Nessie, to a swimming lesson. Her other children, 6-year-old Lucia, known affectionately as Lulu, and 2-year-old Leo, had stayed behind with their nanny, 50-year-old Yoselin Ortega. Marina had made a plan to meet Yoselin later that day, but there was no sign of her or the children. Marina grew more and more concerned by their absence. Her text messages were met with no response. "Where are you? Where's Lulu?" she messaged. She headed home with Nessie to see if anything was wrong. Going up to the apartment and opening the door, it was eerily quiet and all of the lights had been turned off. She went back downstairs to talk to the doorman, asking if they'd left already. He said they hadn't. She went back upstairs and into the apartment to search for them. She saw her daughter's bag and her son's stroller in their usual places. Clutching her daughter's hand, she went from room to room. She got to the bathroom and saw a crack of light coming from under the door. Lying in the tub were the bodies of Leo and Lucia. Lucia had been stabbed 30 times, and Leo 5 times. She saw Yoselin and the pair locked eyes. Yoselin then picked up a large knife and began to stab herself. Rima Starr lived on the same floor as the Krims and heard the commotion. There was some kind of screaming about "you slit her throat," she said. It was horrible. The doorman, Glenn Ludi, immediately rang 911 and the screams of anguish could be heard in the background. The police were soon at the apartment building, and when they entered the lobby they found Marina Krim screaming and crying, clutching onto Nessie. A neighbour described her as inconsolable, hysterical, frantic. The scene that awaited the first responders was beyond anybody's worst nightmare. Blood was all over the floor and walls of the bathroom. 2 bloodied knives were found, one in the hallway and one in the bathroom sink. It was a scene of total carnage. As emergency workers continued to flood into the building, Marina's husband, Kevin, was arriving home from a business trip. He worked as a senior vice president for CNBC Digital and was heading back to John F. Kennedy International Airport. When he arrived, he was met by 2 officers in plain clothes. He listened to a voicemail that Marina had left him, and all he heard was screaming. They then told him what had happened. 37-year-old Kevin Krim and his 36-year-old wife Marina shared 3 children. They were originally from California, but later made the move from San Francisco to New York. Marina had worked as a kindergarten teacher after receiving an undergraduate degree in fine arts and then a master's in education. After becoming a mother, she would leave the profession to spend more time with her children. They then went on to hire a nanny for some extra help, 50-year-old Yoselin Ortega, who had been with the family for 2 years. Yoselin was immediately arrested and taken out of the building on a stretcher. She was in critical condition. She was taken to New York Presbyterian Hospital to be treated for her self-inflicted injuries.
In other news, tonight there is a growing memorial outside an Upper West Side apartment building where a nanny is accused of killing 2 children.
As news began to spread about what had happened, so many were in a state of absolute shock, and a memorial soon began to form outside the building. Marina and Nessie were escorted from the building by police covered in a white sheet to shield them from the photographers. Marina was taken to hospital to receive treatment for trauma. Leo and Lucia were transported to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center, but tragically both would be pronounced dead. This was now a double murder inquiry. what on earth had happened and why.
They came to the Upper West Side today and stared, silently, hopelessly trying to make some sense of all the horror and pain here. But how in the world do you make sense out of this?
As the children's nanny, Jocelyn, affectionately called Josie by the children, was treated as a member of the family. She was born in Santiago de los Caballeros in the Dominican Republic and later moved to the USA and became a naturalized citizen. She lived in Manhattan with her sister, niece and son. Jocelyn's sister had connected her with the family. She too was a nanny and her employer's child went to the same preschool as Lucia. She went up to Marina during a ballet class and asked if she had a nanny. Marina told her she didn't. The Krims had only recently moved to New York and they were considering hiring someone to help. They asked a reference about Jocelyn and it all appeared great. It would later be reported that a relative had provided Jocelyn with a false reference, claiming she had been a nanny for a child that didn't exist. Marina kept a blog which detailed the ins and outs of life in the Krim family. Life with the little Krim kids shared what the children got up to and all things family life. It was clear that Jocelyn was very much a part of the family. In February 2012, just a few months before the killings, the Krim family travelled to the Dominican Republic for 9 days and stayed with Jocelyn's sister for a portion. "We spent the past 9 days in the Dominican Republic," Marina wrote on February 18th. "We spent half our time at our nanny, Josie's sister's home in Santiago, and the rest at Balcones de Atlántico in Las Terrenas, a condo-style hotel where the real housewives of Dominican Republic and their families hang on weekends. It was wonderful. We met Josie's amazing familia, and the Dominican Republic is a wonderful country." Marina and Kevin were utterly devoted and dedicated parents, and more blog posts revealed just how much they adored their children. On September 30th, Marina posted a photograph of their son after his 2nd birthday. "One of the best parts of my day is after I drop both girls off at school and have 3 precious hours with little Lito, all to myself. Okay, I'm getting near cheesy. I adore this boy so much."
Investigators are trying to figure out this morning what could have made a New York family's caretaker turn on the children she was paid to protect.
Pull it up! Keep going! On the floor of the bathroom is a nanny who apparently had inflicted wounds on her throat.
Herbert Klein lives next door and heard the mother screaming.
She's crying out, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? My life is ruined. I have no children. I have no children.
Police escorted Krim from the scene after dark with her only surviving child, a sheet draped over their heads. The 50-year-old nanny survived the wounds to her throat, and this morning police say she's in critical but stable condition at a nearby hospital.
Her self-inflicted wound to the neck had missed all major arteries and veins. She was initially sedated and intubated and placed under police watch. 2 days later, she came out of her coma and was unable to speak. She was handcuffed to the bed. Her injuries meant that she had to communicate by mouthing words and pointing to the alphabet. She wrote, "I had to do everything and take care of the kids. I worked as a babysitter only and she wanted me to do everything, so wanted 5 hours of cleaning every week." Investigators needed to look further into Jocelyn's life to see if anything could give any clues as to why she had done what she'd done. Several months before, Jocelyn had moved her 17-year-old son from the Dominican Republic out to New York. She reportedly wanted to send him to a private school. Her brother agreed to pay the first year, but said she would be responsible for the fees that followed. She had split from her son's father in 2001, and her ex said there were no issues between the two of them. He was shocked by what had happened, a source told the media. He had no idea what demons were raging. Jocelyn's niece referred to the incident as shocking. She loved those kids. "I don't know what would make her do this." She added her aunt seemed a little off and was acting kind of nervous lately. One neighbour had only met the nanny a few days before and described her as very quiet, saying she didn't interact and just stared straight ahead. Some of Jocelyn's neighbours in Hamilton Heights had noticed a change in her. According to them, she appeared to have lost weight, was unhappy, nervous and agitated. She had recently moved back to Hamilton Heights after losing the apartment she was in the Bronx. She was selling things on the side to try and earn some more money. Jocelyn told investigators that she was having money troubles, and she allegedly appeared enraged after she was asked by the family to do housework in exchange for more money. She said something like, "I'm paid to watch the children, not clean up and do housework," a source told the media. The day before the killings, Faustio Cornell, who had known Jocelyn since she was a child, said that she had asked his wife to take her to a psychologist, which she did. As the anesthesia wore off, she was in what was described as a catatonic state, eventually moving her eyes and nodding. The more she understood, the less she wanted to talk, a law enforcement source said. She was then formally charged in her hospital bed with murder.
That Manhattan nanny who stabbed 2 children in her care has been indicted. 50-year-old Yoselin Ortega has been indicted now with first-degree murder. She is charged with killing 6-year-old Lucia Krim and her 2-year-old brother Leo in their Manhattan apartment back on October 25th. The children's mother found them dead when she returned home from an errand with another child.
As the story continued to make headlines around the world, many were stunned that a crime could be so brutal and carried out by someone so trusted. The shock was palpable. The sadness we all feel for Kevin, Marina and their family is without measure. There are simply no words to convey the magnitude of this tragedy, said Mark Hoffman, the CEO and president of CNBC, where Kevin worked. Both Kevin and Marina's parents and their siblings, who were based on the West Coast, flew out to New York to offer any and all support they could. Kevin's father said they hadn't returned to the apartment. "I don't know if they ever will, I don't know if they could," he said. Kevin said he was doing all he could to be strong for his wife and daughter, with his father saying, "Our son texted our daughters to say, 'I can't talk to mom and dad right now because I'll just fall apart. We're just grieving. Worst nightmare anyone could ever imagine," said the children's grandmother Karen Krim. "We have no clue what set her off." To the 2 charges of first-degree murder and the 2 charges of second-degree murder, Jocelyn pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Prosecutors said she was aware of what she was doing and that she intentionally and savagely slaughtered the 2 in her care, and this was born out of a resentment that she held for Marina. They added that there was no credible evidence to show any mental illness or defect. During her first court appearance, lawyers said they needed more time to go through 6,000 pages of medical records to determine if she was fit to stand trial. She was held without bail at the prison ward for psychiatric patients at Elmhurst Hospital Center. A memorial for the children was held at Avery Fisher Hall in Manhattan. Following the memorial, the couple issued a statement. "We want to thank you for your extraordinary outpouring of love and kindness. Lulu and Leo were 2 of our 3 best friends, and we miss them so much. Our daughter Nessie is very strong, and with your support we will be strong for her." Earlier this week we gathered family and friends to celebrate the beautiful lives of Lulu and Leo. It is important to us that they are remembered as the sweet, creative, fun-loving children that they were. We are honouring our children by creating the Lulu and Leo Fund. The fund will support participatory art and science education for young children in schools, museums and other community institutions. Lulu's art classes provided some of her most joyful and enriching moments. We would like to help other children obtain access to similarly great experiences. In October 2013, in a ray of light for the couple, they welcomed a baby boy, Felix. The fall is a busy and emotional time of year for us. We have the important anniversary of Leo's birthday and Lulu and Leo's deaths, the family wrote on Facebook. We also have some wonderful news. Marina is pregnant with a baby boy due in late January. Nessie is excited about her role as new queen bee of the family, and little Felix, who turns 2 this weekend, is thrilled to give up his crib to become roommates with Nessie in a new bunk bed. With each new baby, we feel a special and closer connection to Lulu and Leo, who are a constant presence in their siblings' looks, gestures and voices. Marina would go on to welcome a baby boy, Linus. Jocelyn Ortega was eventually declared fit to stand trial. The court-ordered psychiatric evaluation determined that she was able to assist in her own defence. Jocelyn Ortega went in front of Judge Gregory Caro. "If you don't get emotional during this trial, then maybe you need to check your pulse," the judge said during jury selection. Jocelyn had rejected a plea deal of 30 years to life for pleading guilty to 2 charges of murder. The previous few years had been pre-trial litigation focusing on her state of mind. New York has a high bar for an insanity defence to be successful, and as a result, it rarely is. Her lawyers were going to have to prove that Jocelyn didn't know what she was doing was wrong, and that she didn't understand the consequences of what it was she was doing, something the prosecution made clear they did not believe at all.
Trial against a nanny accused of killing 2 young children in her care got underway today in Lower Manhattan. Prosecutors say in 2012, Jocelyn Ortega stabbed a 6-year-old girl and her 2-year-old brother inside their family's Upper West Side apartment. CBS 2's Hazel Sanchez has more now from the courthouse.
Nanny Jocelyn Ortega sat emotionless as prosecutors detailed the unthinkable murders of the 2 beautiful children who were under her care.
Marina Krim opened the bathroom door and saw the bloodied, lifeless bodies of her 6-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son stacked in the bathtub, their eyes open, covered in blood, staring ahead. And between her and her dead babies was the defendant, the person responsible for this atrocity, standing, holding one of the knives that she had used to kill those babies. These are the undisputed facts in this case. And these are the facts and the evidence that will prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant intentionally murdered Lulu and Leo Krim on October 25th, 2012. That she knew what she was doing when she killed them, and that she knew that killing them was wrong.
I will ask that you determine whether or not my client had an ability to understand and perceive and confront her illness on October 25th, 12. I will ask you to determine whether she had the prerequisite mental state.
Objection as to the summation entirely.
Respectfully accept. The insanity defense to be proffered by Jocelyn Ortega is deeply rooted in the cultural and legal traditions of our democratic society. While on the one hand there is legitimate need to hold and punish criminal defendants who are accountable and responsible pursuant to our laws for their actions, there is also the law.
Well, I'm going to instruct you on the law. It's what I instruct you on. You must follow. Okay? Go ahead.
I will argue and the defense will show.
Objection as to I will argue.
I will prove and the defense will show that it is wrong and a wrong has been committed here, an intentional wrong. If a person is capable of that intent, was she capable of forming an intent to kill on October 25th, 12? That is the question here. You are, and I will ask you to determine at the end of this case whether or not these acts were driven by my client's acute psychotic state. My client's, Judge, this is what I...
Overruled. Go ahead.
Whether or not these acts that are set out on People's Direct were driven by my client's acute psychotic state. Were they driven by her delusions, her hallucinations, her dissociation, and her severe depression? Or were they intentional?
Jocelyn Ortega viciously and violently slaughtered Lucia Krim and Leo Krim on October 25th, 2012. Intentionally and deliberately.
According to the defense, 55-year-old Ortega is not responsible for murder. She, too, is a victim of mental illness never treated.
The evidence will show that she has a corroborated history of hearing voices and dissociating from reality since the age of 16.
Now, the defense says Ortega had no motive to kill the children, a hallmark of insanity. The prosecution, however, says her actions were deliberate, an attempt to get even with the Krims for trying to make her work hard.
Jocelyn had taken 2 knives from the kitchen before launching her violent attack in the bathroom, Assistant District Attorney Courtney Grove said during the opening statements. She added that she slit their throats to stop them from screaming. She said that Lucia knew what was happening, and the 30 different stab and slash wounds were consistent with her trying to fight back. Their wounds were so severe the first responders initially thought that they may have been decapitated. Leo had so much blood on him, the officer who took him out of the bath said he was worried he might slip out of his hands. She planned these murders and executed them at a time she knew she would not be interrupted, Grove said. When talking about the appointment Jocelyn had made with the psychologist just before the killings, it was revealed that this was the only contact she had had with a mental health professional in 30 years. She had feelings of anxiety and stress and felt like a failure, the district attorney said. That therapist whom Jocelyn had seen testified. Dr. Thomas Caffrey said she had met with him to talk about several issues, including guilt, anxiety and depression, but she did not come across as wanting to hurt herself or others. He said there was no evidence to suggest that she suffered from hallucinations or delusions. One of the people to testify for the prosecution was Marina.
Marina Krim didn't wait to be asked any questions, but voice trembling, her body shaking, burst aloud in the courtroom, calling Yoselin Ortega liar.
It's like a total horror movie. I walk down the hall and I see the light on under the door, she said. I see Lulu. I knew that she was dead. She's lying in the bathtub and her eyes are open. I see Leo next to her. They had blood on them. Then I see the defendant, blood all over her and eyes bugging out. All I remember saying to her is, "I hate you." Prosecutors say Lulu tried desperately to defend herself.
She knew what was happening, she understood what the defendant was doing, and she fought to live. And the defendant repaid Lulu's resistance with almost 30 different stab and slash wounds to her body and her neck.
The devastated mother says, quote, "She killed my best friends." And when leaving the courtroom, Krim turned to Ortega and said, "You're gross. You're disgusting."
A defense attorney asked Krim about talking to police after the murders. Krim grew upset and yelled, "I don't remember what I said that day. I was grieving in a massive way." Krim testified a few weeks before the murders. She saw the nanny, quote, "looking at me with this glare on her face that was just pure evil, a really weird, mean look."
We saw jurors in tears as they left the courtroom after hearing Marina Krim's heartbreaking testimony. The defendant, Yoselin Ortega, remained emotionless throughout the entire hearing. From emotional to angry, it was day 2 of testimony in the case of the Upper West Side nanny charged with killing 2 children in her care. Today, defiant mother Marina Krim was back on the stand. At times, she directly addressed her former nanny, Yoselin Ortega, and called her evil. Eyewitness News reporter Rob Nelson has the story.
After finishing 2 days of gut-wrenching testimony, Marina Krim again lashed out at the accused killer of her 2 children today, shouting, "You're evil, you're evil, please get me out of here," as she left the courtroom in a fit of anger and grief.
For the jurors to sit and listen to what had happened to the children, and to see the awful photographs from the crime scene, one cannot even begin to imagine the impact it must have had. One juror was left shaking after listening to the descriptions of their injuries. Another juror would actually ask to be removed, after saying he could no longer be a fair and impartial member of the jury, after seeing the photographs from the crime scene. As those photographs were shown, Yoselin didn't look at them, instead choosing to stare straight ahead. There were points during the trial that her behaviour was bizarre, laughing when a retired police officer spoke about his interactions with her after the killings. At other points she shook her head and rolled her eyes. Yoselin's defence lawyer said that she had suffered with episodes of psychosis and hallucinations from a young age, and instead of seeking help, she had relied on her faith and prayer. After the murders, she told a psychiatrist that she had felt the devil penetrate her body, and that she had heard voices telling her to kill. Mental illness does not announce itself like a bad cough or a limp. Sometimes it sneaks up and nestles in before anyone takes notice, the defence said. The prosecution disagreed and argued that her behaviour that day actually suggested someone who was very aware of what they were doing, saying she had left her phone behind and had hung several important documents on the doorknob of her apartment that day. She was putting her affairs in order. Her plan that day was to kill the Krim children and to kill herself, the prosecution said. Her son testified and referred to the killings as an accident. "I'm sorry, did you just say the accident?" the prosecutor asked. "Unfortunately, 2 children died," her son said. While some had said she appeared to be plagued by demons before the killings, her son said he didn't see that side of her, but did say she appeared to be sad and depressed that day, adding that she had kissed him goodbye and waved him off to school as normal. He said that on the night of the murders he had received a phone call from his mum's phone and said he heard a man's voice say, "I need help," before hanging up. She had left her phone at home, but it was never recovered. The line was also disconnected shortly after the killings. Although there was no clear motive, the prosecutor argued it could have been a combination of jealousy of Marina and her money troubles were evident. She couldn't afford her son's private school, she'd lost her apartment and was back living with her sister. But of course the theory of jealousy and money being behind it was exactly that, a theory. You may believe you have not heard a satisfactory answer, because there just isn't a satisfactory answer, the prosecutor said. But not knowing why the defendant slaughtered Lucia and Leo Krim does not mean that she is not responsible for those actions or for those murders. It merely means there is no good answer. Kevin Krim would also testify, and his testimony would leave members of the jury in tears. He described saying goodbye to his son and daughter. Lulu and Leo were lying on hospital beds, sheets up to their chins. They looked beautiful and strange. They had lost a lot of blood, so they were blue, but they still had this perfect skin, the long eyelashes. I knelt down and I kissed them and I said goodbye.
With a look of disgust on his face, Kevin Krim sat on a courtroom bench just a few yards away from Yoselin Ortega, the woman he once trusted to care for his children. Her attorney says the 55-year-old suffers from severe psychosis and depression and heard voices telling her to kill the kids. But a video shown during the trial contradicts the defense claim, as Ortega is heard saying she never heard or saw Satan.
Do you remember at all talking to her about that you felt that you're being possessed by devil? The devil was taking control of your body?
No. Prosecutors claim Ortega acted out of anger against the Krims, particularly the children's mother, Marina Krim, for allegedly overworking her. Marina Krim was not in court today. The jurors are expected to begin deliberating tomorrow. In Lower Manhattan, Hazel Sanchez, CBS 2 News.
The trial would go on for 2 months. The public and media interest in it was massive, and everybody held their breath and waited as the jury retired to deliberate. After 2 days, they had reached their verdict.
A jury today convicted a nanny of murder in the brutal stabbing of 2 young children in her care.
Yoselin Ortega was found guilty of killing 6-year-old Lulu Krim and her 2-year-old brother Leo.
Find the defendant guilty, not guilty, or not responsible by reason of mental disease or defect.
Yoselin Ortega sat nearly still as 4 guilty verdicts were read, only moving once to wipe a tear from her cheek.
Yoselin Ortega was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder.
The victim's father, Kevin Krim, listened from the front row with alternate jurors who had already been dismissed but came back to hear the verdict.
The impact this case had had on the jury was obvious.
We were divided at the beginning, and we were divided until the moment we made the decision.
I think I can speak on behalf of everybody. I say we feel great in the decision that we rendered.
This was a very difficult decision for all of us. While the basic facts were very clear from the beginning, we also wanted to be sure that we were giving everybody a fair opportunity. It was not a decision we reached lightly or easily. There were some raised voices and a lot of tears. But I think we all feel good that we addressed all of the issues and fairly weighed everything that was presented to us.
After she was found guilty, Kevin wrote on Facebook that he had hugged as many members of the jury as he could, saying that the jurors had been through hell having to sit through that trial. This process has been very challenging for us, but it has also reaffirmed our love of New York, a city that Lulu and Leo loved dearly. It was now time for Yoselin to be sentenced.
Some words, Your Honor. This defendant murdered 2 innocent children. She did it intentionally. She did it with the full knowledge of the consequences of her actions. Now is the time for justice. Justice for Lulu, justice for Leo, justice for Marina, and Kevin, and Nessie, justice for the people of the state of New York, justice for all of the people who are part of the Krim's life, who love the Krim family and love their children. And it's time for justice to be meted out for horrific acts of violence that this defendant inflicted upon those children and upon the parents and the family. Nobody saw signs of a serious mental illness because there was no serious mental illness. That's what the jury found, and rejected her defense. And that's the way that she should be sentenced.
At the sentencing hearing, Kevin called Yoselin an evil and utterly dangerous narcissist and a complete failure. When speaking to the judge, he said, "I trust that you do not need this request from Lulu and Leo's dad after all you've heard and seen, but I will make it anyway. In your sentencing decision, please follow the law as you always have, by ensuring that the defendant can never leave prison alive. The defendant knows nothing of responsibility or remorse. She should also know nothing of hope.
And more importantly, it is right that she will go from being hated by the world to being forgotten by the world before she's even dead. While Lulu and Leo's siblings and legions of family and friends, even friends who never knew them, will never forget their inspiring legacies. In my best moments, I feel Lulu and Leo inspiring me and carrying me forward. In my most difficult moments, I try to ask myself what Lulu and Leo would choose to do. It's the best beacon of hope, the best guidance most of us could ever hope to have. Thank you. Thank you.
Marina also spoke at the sentencing hearing.
My family and I, we create and build. The defendant may think she destroyed Lulu and Leo, but she is a failure in this too. Lulu and Leo are powerful forces. There are two stars now that will always lead us forward. Thank you.
Using a translator and speaking in Spanish, Yoselin told the court.
I'm very sorry for everything that happened. But I hope that no one goes through what I have gone through. Although many people wish me all the worst, my life is in the hands of God. I ask for a great deal of forgiveness. God, to Marina, to Kevin.
Her lawyer asked the judge for mercy and that she be put in protective custody with access to mental health professionals and doctors. I understand that my client has taken the lives of two precious children. I am praying that you do not take her life away without the prospect of parole. The judge disagreed. Judge Gregory Caro described what she had done as pure evil and praised the jury for rejecting the defence of insanity. Your planning and forethought regarding your suicide plan on that day was certainly unmistakable. What's unclear, and it's unclear mainly because you claim to have a lack of memory, is why you decided to take the lives of the children.
Just moments ago, the sentence came down, and Yoselin Ortega will spend the rest of her life behind bars.
Yoselin Ortega was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole.
The parents are channeling their pain into a new initiative named for their children, advocating for legislation that makes falsifying references on job applications for caregivers a crime.
In order to try and limit the chances of something like this ever happening again, the family announced their support for legislation that would make it a criminal offence for someone to submit an application relating to childcare that included false references and credentials. We were deceived and betrayed by the defendant's family, who remain wholly unaccountable for their roles in the murders of our children. Every child deserves a caregiver who is honest and responsible, and no one should think they can lie when it comes to the care and safety of our children. Trying to find the right words to bring a case like this to a close is very difficult. The violence and horror that was on display in that apartment in October 2012 is something that many people could not conjure up in their worst nightmares. To take such an unspeakable tragedy and create something as positive and inspiring as the Lulu and Leo Fund is incredible and a true testament to the characters of Marina and Kevin Krim. the dignity, strength, and grace they displayed in the wake of such an unfathomable loss should serve as an inspiration to us all.